Alright guys, today we're going to be talking about the best compact phones you can buy for 2021, 2022, and I want to add the ASUS ZenFone 8 to my list here, and I think the list is pretty solid for right now. So this phone is extremely solid. It is very expensive, well not very expensive, but it's pretty expensive at around 700 bucks right now. So it is the latest and greatest that you can get so far in the compact space here, and it's got a glass back, aluminum frame on here. It's IP68 dust and water resistant. It's got a great build quality. I think if you get it in the silver color, I think it looks even better. So you have on here a Super AMOLED 120 Hz display. It's HDR10 plus as well. It's fairly bright too. It's at 5.9 inches, 1080p 446 for the PPI. So the display is overall beautiful. You have a punch hole, pretty slim bezels on here, and like I said, the screen or the body of the phone and the screen size is small enough, definitely for someone with smaller hands to be able to reach and not necessarily strain your hands. Now I do have some smaller phones on the list, which you'll see, but I do think this is a good size for most people, since people are on their phones constantly, so you might not want the display to be too small. So this is a good option. You also have Android 11 with the Zen UI 8 on here as well. Basically stock Android, and ASUS throws in a couple of customizations and features and stuff like that, but essentially it's really aiming towards more of a stock Android type of feel. You have the Snapdragon 888 and Adreno 660. Basically it's a flagship compact phone. It can pretty much play any game. Check out my videos on it: Call of Duty, Fortnite, PUBG. You can play all those games at max settings, no problem. So it is a extremely powerful phone. No SD card support, 128 gigs of internal storage, and 6 or 8 gigs of RAM depending on your configuration. You also have on here stereo speakers, which absolutely sound amazing. Some of the best that I've heard from a compact smartphone. The speakers are actually pretty crazy. You do have a headphone jack still on here, so that is really nice. NFC is on board. The fingerprint scanner is under the display. That works awesome as well. And believe it or not, the cameras are really awesome here. You have a dual camera setup, 64 megapixel standard and a 12 megapixel ultra wide. It actually can shoot in 8K at 24 frames per second, so super sharp video on this phone. And you also have a 12 megapixel selfie cam that can shoot in 4K as well. Colors and image quality is going to be super nice on this phone. Just dynamic range, being able to shoot in low light is pretty solid on here. Overall, I was just really happy with image quality. The selfie cam is really good on here too. So if you're buying this phone and you want a great camera, this is definitely going to be pretty solid. You do have on here a 4,000 milliamp battery, and this is where this phone kind of falls short. Most people were getting around 4 hours of screen on time. If you're a lighter user, I was able to squeeze around like 5 hours, but a full day's use is usually around 6 hours, so it falls short of being able to go a full day. But I think battery life, you're getting, when you have a smaller phone, that's kind of the price you pay. But you do have 30-watt charging on here with reverse charging as well, so I think it's a solid pick. It might be the smallest on the list is the iPhone 12 mini, and this is one of the more powerful and newer ones that you can get on this list. And it's a pretty small device, body size wise. It's actually a little bit smaller than the iPhone SE that we're going to talk about. But this phone has a glass and metal design. It feels great in the hand. Very tiny, very cute little phone to look at. It's also IP68 dust and water resistant, and you have a 5.4 inch display, but this phone has great screen to body ratio. So when I say that it's really small, it does feel super small in the hand. It's a Super Retina XDR OLED display, HDR10, 1080p 476 for the PPI. It's a beautiful display, very sharp display. My one little gripe about this phone was I think the notch was too big on such a small phone like this, but from what I see from most people, once you use it for a good amount of time, it's not that big of a deal. Now you do have the latest version of iOS 14 on here, and this phone will be getting updates for years and years and years to come. So the Apple A14 chip is on here, and it's a blazing fast phone. It does not miss a beat. So whether you're bouncing in and out of a whole bunch of applications, or scrolling or just playing video games. This phone can play any game, high settings, maxed out, whatever. So this is a very powerful, tiny little phone here. You also do not have micro SD support, of course, on iPhones. The base model is 64 gigs with 4 gigs of RAM. You also have some pretty nice sounding stereo speakers, as well. Has a good amount of bass quality actually for such a small size here. So I was really happy with speaker quality on this phone. Of course, there's no headphone jack on iPhones, and you do have NFC with Apple Pay, of course, and the Face ID works fast. It's your only option for getting into your phone. I wish they would use the physical fingerprint scanner, just put it in the power button and get rid of the notch completely, but maybe they will eventually. So this phone actually has excellent cameras on it. So you have a 12 megapixel wide and a 12 megapixel ultra wide, 4K video with a 12 megapixel selfie camera that also shoots 4K video. Absolutely beautiful photos. You're getting the same photos you would get pretty much on the iPhone 12. Just beautiful detail, color, great dynamic range. The ultra wide is really nice. The video on iPhones to me is some of the best video that you can get on any smartphones. You also have a pretty good selfie camera as well for FaceTime and stuff. You've also got okay battery life on this phone. It's a 2227 milliamp battery with 20 watt fast charging. You also get the magnetic fast charging, wireless charging, and then battery life on here, you're averaging around 4 hours of screen on time, 4 hours and 30 minutes depending on how you use it. So not that great screen on time, so battery life could be a little bit better on here, but overall this is a really solid pick. Next is the Samsung Galaxy S10e, and this is one of my favorite phones on the list because the price is just really solid on here. So this one comes in at about $295 right now. I got mine off Amazon, and this is an excellent phone. Still pretty much a flagship phone. You could definitely one hand this phone easily. So it's got a premium design. It's a glass and metal phone on here, IP68 dust and water resistant as well, and it just feels really solid and feels really good in the hand. That's one of my favorite things about this phone. So you have a 5.8 inch display. It's a dynamic AMOLED display, 1080p 438 for the PPI. It's a pretty nice looking display. It gives off some very vibrant colors. You have a little punch hole on the right hand side. So overall the display quality is really good on the S10e. Still gives off some great colors. So you do have Android 11 on here with One UI, and you also have the Snapdragon 855 and Adreno 640. Still pretty much a flagship chip when it comes to performance and gaming, so you can do some gaming on here just fine. I think I have a full gaming test for you guys to check out if you really curious about it, but performance on this phone is excellent. You do have micro SD support and 128 gigs of internal storage along with 6 gigs of RAM. Now this phone also has really nice sounding stereo speakers tuned by AKG, so they sound really crisp and clear, and they have good bass punch to them as well. You also get a headphone jack with this phone, which is really nice too. So it does come packed with NFC. You also get the Samsung desktop experience with this phone as well, and you also get the fingerprint scanner side mounted, which is awesome. It's my favorite place to put a physical fingerprint scanner. Now this phone also has great cameras on it. You have a dual camera setup at 12 megapixel standard and a 16 megapixel ultra wide. You get 4K video and a 10 megapixel selfie camera that also shoots 4K video. So as you can see from the photos, you get some pretty nice and crisp and clear looking photos here. Great detail, pretty good depth of field. White balance is always pretty solid on this device. You do get really I guess popping colors on here, oversaturated colors sometimes depending on what you're taking a picture of, but overall the front facing camera was really good as well, so I was really happy with image quality, and video is pretty solid on this device too. Now you also have on here, again, that's sort of the theme with this phone, with these phones, battery life is kind of on the short side, but this one does pretty decent. It's a 3100 milliamp battery. It does have 15 watt fast charging, and this phone has reverse wireless charging, so you can charge up another device if you want to, another phone, headphones, whatever. And you also have wireless charging on here as well. I average around maybe 5 hours and 30 minutes to 6 hours of screen on time, which is fine, and again that varies depending on how hard you use your phone, but yeah, so battery life is pretty good on a device this size. So next is the iPhone SE 2020. So this phone is probably one of the smallest screens on the list, of course. coming in at 4.7 inches. The body on here is pretty solid as well. It's definitely a one-handing phone, and it is a glass and metal design on here, IP67 dust and water resistant. Overall build quality is solid on here. It's a 720p plus display, 326 for the PPI. Of course, it's an IPS display, so it's not, you know, an OLED display like the rest of these phones, but it still looks pretty good. You get pretty good vibrant colors on here. It's fairly bright, so I didn't have a huge issue with it. And again, very compact screen size, which I think is going to be beneficial if you want just really the smallest screen. So it does have the Apple A13 chip, and this phone is still blazing fast with iOS 14. It's super fast. It does not miss a beat when launching applications, multitasking, gaming. You can game on high settings on this phone, so it's a very powerful chip in this phone still, especially at you can pick one up for around 300 to 350. I'll have all those links down below. You do have 64 gigs of internal storage and 3 gigs of RAM on the base model. You also have stereo speakers, which sound pretty good. They have a good amount of bass to them. And of course, there's no headphone jack on iPhones. Again, no SD card support. You do have Apple Pay on board as well with this phone. And you have the Touch ID up front, which works great, especially in these times where you sort of have to take the mask down. It can get annoying. So having Touch ID on this phone is pretty awesome. It works fine. So this phone actually has very good camera. So it just has one camera. That's the only, I guess, negative for the setup. There's no ultra wide depth sensor or anything like that. It's just one 12 megapixel lens, 4K video, 7 megapixel selfie, 1080p. But as you can see from the shots, it takes pretty good photos. You get really good natural colors. You also get pretty good detail, pretty good depth of field, even though you don't have, you know, a depth sensor or anything like that. You know, it's fine. So I think for people who just want to, you know, take your phone out, snap a photo, and get a good quality photo, this is still an excellent phone for that. So you do have on here, again, a small battery, 1821 milliamps, 18 watt fast charging with wireless charging, which is really nice on a mid-ranger like this. And battery life on here is fine. You can get around 4 to 5 hours of screen on time. That's usually what I get on this device. Next is the Google Pixel 4a 5G. So this phone ranges from around $350 to $400. This is a really solid phone. It has a lot of cool stuff to it. So not really a flashy or fancy design. It's pretty much a plastic build on here. And there's no IP rating. You do have a 6.2 inch OLED display, 1080p 413 for the PPI. With the little punch hole, the screen looks fine. You get really good colors on here. It's fairly bright as well. One of the bonus factors with these Pixel phones is that you get a pure stock version of Android, which is great. So that means when Google releases updates, you'll be the first one to get them. So when Android 12 comes out, you'll be the first in line to get that software update. So if you care about that, these are great phones. You also have the Snapdragon 765 5G with the Adreno 620. Performance on here was pretty good. I did not notice any real lag with this phone. You can play games on here just fine. Bouncing in and out of applications is great. So the chipset is pretty decent as well. And then again, you get that 5G. So if you have that available in your area, that's also a bonus. Now this phone does not have any micro SD support, but you do have 128 gigs of internal storage and 6 gigs of RAM, which I think is enough for most people. This phone does retain the headphone jack, which is something that I love. And you also have stereo speakers, which sound excellent, great bass quality, very loud sounding speakers. Now this phone does have NFC and a physical fingerprint scanner on the back, which works great. Had no problems with that. The main highlight with this phone is obviously the cameras. You have a 12.2 megapixel standard lens, and then you have a 16 megapixel ultra wide, 4K video, and then an 8 megapixel selfie. This phone is going to take absolutely great photos. So it's really can take, in certain situations, it can take flagship quality photos. If I compare them to some of my flagships that I have, it's very competitive with them. I don't think it's as good, but it takes really good photos for this price range, which is something that I like. Low light photos are pretty good on here as well. The ultra wide is really well, as well as the front facing camera. So I just really like Pixel cameras. They just take some awesome photos for this price point. Video is okay on these Pixel phones. It's not as good as the photos that you would get. And also to talk about battery life, this phone does pretty good with battery life. Now, I have never used any phone on 5G because I don't have it in my area, but you have a 3,885 milliamp battery, 18-watt fast charging, and I was able to get easily around 7 hours of screen on time with this phone, so it does pretty good on battery life as well. So overall, the Pixel 4a 5G does have a lot going for it. Last on the list is the iPhone 8. Absolutely love this phone as a budget option. You can find it well below 200 bucks, and it still offers a lot. So you still have that premium design of glass and metal. It is still technically, it's an older flagship. It's IP67 dust and water resistant. The same Retina display at 4.7 inches, very small screen, 720p plus, 326 for the PPI. Overall, a pretty nice and colorful display. Had no issues with it. This phone does support iOS 14. I feel like with the Apple 11 chip, it can still do another version or two, so I think it should be good up to iOS 16. So this phone was pretty good bouncing in and out of applications. Gaming on here is pretty good as well. Obviously you can't max stuff out, but casual gaming is fine on here. You also get stereo speakers, which sound great, have a decent bass punch, and you also have Touch ID on the front, which works great. Again, really awesome for the times that we live in. So the cameras on here are pretty good. It's just a single, lens, 12 megapixel standard, shoots in 4K, 7 megapixel selfie, shoots in 1080p. As you can see from the photos, it still takes pretty decent photos for an older flagship phone. So if you're in good lighting, you could definitely get a really good shot out of this phone. The front-facing camera is still fine for FaceTime and stuff like that. I didn't have any issues with that. Video is pretty solid on here as well. So for under 200 bucks, I was pretty pleased with the camera quality on here. You also have, again, a smaller battery, 1,821 milliamps, then 15-watt fast charging with wireless charging. So again, this phone will average around 4 to 5 hours of screen on time. And you also have wireless charging on here as well, which is really nice. So that's pretty much it, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.